after playing PALWORLD for a good amount of time, and it must be closing on 2 weeks now, I want to go through what I think are the best settings for general play whilst you are going through PALWORLD. Some of this is going to come down to personal preference, and I'll try to explain why I think some of these are better than others and why you might maybe pick something a little bit different to me. So let's get into this, and starting with day and night time speed, I actually like doubling this up. This is because the day and night will still be long enough that you'll get to participate and capture the pals that come out at night and that kind of thing. But the main advantage of this is your pals will go to sleep more often, so you'll get overall the same amount of work out of your pals. But because they go to sleep more often, as long as you have at least medium beds in your bases, they'll effectively never get injured, because they'll get like a minor injury, go on the medium bed, and then the injury effectively immediately gets healed. Same thing goes for the baths. Because the day's moving around faster, they'll go to the bath, and they'll just in general work a lot better, and you'll have to micromanage them a little bit less, which I just think is really, really useful. Experience rate is going to come down to what you are doing at the time. So for example, I am already at max level, but my kids and wife and everyone else that I'm playing this with are not. So having them catch up with the XP rate up so high is very, very useful. In addition, this also means you can take a pal from level 1 to being close to level cap in one encounter with something like the Jet Dragon or one of the end game bosses. So quite useful if you just want to get pals leveled up and you're in a rush. I don't recommend rushing this game. I think the game actually plays better if you take your time, enjoy the gameplay loop, and don't just try and rush to max level all of the time. I think it's actually a pretty relaxing experience if you take your time with it. So I wouldn't really recommend that. Pal capture rate up to 2. I think this actually is really, really worth it. The capture rate isn't so high that this is game breaking, but in particular when you get to the end game stuff and capturing those said bosses, when you've only got a 5% chance to capture the boss, and the high-end end-game legendary spheres take quite a bit to build, and like me, there's 4 of us in my game world, so I have to supply everybody with everything. Halving the amount of balls we use, which is effectively what you're doing here, is very useful. I think this one's worth having up at max, and I don't see much reason to have it any lower, unless you really want to challenge yourself, but I don't find very much value in that myself. I think the most exciting thing is capturing the pals, and like I say, the end game ones still only hit like 5 or 10% capture rate anyway, so you still get that really good feeling when you capture the harder pals. So pretty good for that, in my opinion. Pal appearance rate, put this up to 3. This does, as it says, affect gameplay performance a little bit, but it's not as bad as you might think. And in general, I actually think that not only does this speed up farming pals, so like you need to catch 10 of each pal to get all of the XP bonuses, but also when it comes to like farming up the pal materials and all that kind of stuff, this is going to make the pack sizes bigger. But I feel like the main thing is it actually just makes the world look more alive. When you're going around and it's like sets of like 7 Doomuds and stuff, it's pretty good. I actually quite like the aesthetic of this. Really, really nice. The multiplier effects. So this affects all pals, including yours and enemy ones. So it's up to you whether you want to play with this. The damage from pals being down is better in terms of capturing than it is in terms of defense, in my opinion. This is because if you keep this damage to pals low as well, it will effectively mean that pals don't really do too much damage. So if you're trying to capture something that's like rare, or if it's like a shiny or something like this, and this happens to be on, you're going to find capturing with a pal out much easier. And that can be important if you're in like the hot area or the cold area and that kind of thing. You've got like a pal out that's like stabilizing your temperature, which is what I do a lot of the time. This can be pretty useful for that, but also because nothing's doing any damage when it comes to like farming up end game bosses. So if you're after things like the legendary schematics and you're tripling up the pal appearance, which means it's 3 bosses at once, not dying immediately can be pretty handy. And effectively what this turns out is that it's as hard as facing 1, but you're actually facing 3, so you're effectively just tripling your rewards for around the same amount of effort, especially when you think about ×2 capture rate on there as well. So it kind of ends up balancing itself out by getting the extra enemies there and then changing the damage multipliers so that you're not getting too overwhelmed all of the time. But that's up to you guys. Pal hunger and pal stamina rate, this is obviously just quality of life stuff. This basically means that when you're out and about, you won't need to carry so much food. So this is actually a good exercise in weight management, which is why I turned this down, just because obviously I want to get through the game, I want to get videos out for you guys, so I've been speeding this up. This depends on how much of the survival mechanics you want to interact with. Pals will still get hungry. This isn't like a switch switch off thing, even all the way down at 0.1. You're still going to have to do that interaction anyway, so that's fine. Turning this down isn't the end of the world. I actually think this is pretty good. Same with the regeneration. Turning this up a little bit faster means that if your pals get knocked out, they'll regenerate the health as well whilst they are not in battle. So again, mostly just a convenience thing. I think pretty much everything there is sprinkled to taste and isn't really going to affect too much. Damage from player and damage to player. This is basically going to come under the same thing right here. It depends what it is you're doing. Damage from player is both good and bad. Like if it's too high and you're trying to catch anything that's like mid-level or anything like this, you're just not going to be able to do it. Even with like low-level weaponry, you're going to kill everything way too fast. So just be careful with this one. I'd say like maybe ×2 is all right, but once you start getting like some of the high-level weaponry and that kind of thing, it's probably not going to be great to have it all the way up at the top. Damage to player, basically the same thing. I would probably have this at like 0.3 if you're going to have 3 times the enemies on, just because that works out about the same. And so as I was saying before, like maintaining a similar standard difficulty level but making it so that we can get stuff done faster, I think should be a pretty good aim when it comes to the settings. About 0.3, 0.5 I think is actually pretty good if you're going to have increased pals. If you're not going to have increased pals, leave this at 1. Enemies don't do so much damage that you need to be that worried about it. I would equate it that way so that it basically just keeps the difficulty around the same, but you'll just interact with more pals because it just makes everything better. Player hunger and stamina reduction is down on low because my kids are terrible at carrying food, and it's the worst thing ever going out to find them because they've gone and gotten lost. And you know, you've got your 9-year-old having a meltdown because she just dropped like her legendary rifle that you just gave her. So ours is pretty low for that. I would say you probably want this kind of at normal. I don't think it's that egregious that it needs to be low, but for me it's just been mega convenient to have that low, so I've left that there. So far a lot of this is actually sprinkled to taste. Player sleep health regeneration barely even matters. I don't like your health is going to regenerate anyway. Like if you're in a base sleeping, you've probably already healed. So this one doesn't even affect anything. Damage to structure multiplier. This is basically from the raids right now. I assume eventually this will affect PvP, so we don't really care about that. Same as the deterioration rate, we don't care about that. Maximum number of dropped items in the world. This is going to be all of those individual little flakes of ore that you see when your pals are mining stuff. This is one of those things where, and it does run a lot smoother. I had this down at 2000 once, and it does run a lot smoother when you bring this down, but I do worry about like where it deletes from and what happens to all of those items. So like let's say you go up to the 3 pals and you need to save some memory room so that you are not suffering from performance loss too much, then I would bring this down to like 2000. Generally speaking, I don't feel like there's like 2000 items down on the ground like from dropped enemies, but I imagine this probably gets bad if you're doing multiplayer, and let's say like you've got 4 of you all off in different places dropping items from enemies, and then as well as that there are items dropping in 3 bases. I assume this can get pretty full pretty fast. So having this down is going to save you some memory and is going to actually improve your performance. I'm surprised it doesn't really say that on there. Ultimately speaking, I haven't had too much trouble with it, even at the 3 pals, but if we go to say like 2500, that's just going to improve the running of the game a little bit for you. So I didn't try 2500. 2000 though did make a pretty big difference. That's all I'm saying. Gatherable items. This is basically how much you get from mining. So there's really no harm in turning this up a little bit. The health multiplier, have that at low because basically putting that up is going to make mining slower because that's going to increase the HP of the mining node that you're mining. So let's turn that down because you're going to want to get the items out of it nice and fast. And we can make them respawn fast, which is rather nice. So if you want more goodies, which is pretty good, just increase this. So that's going to make everything way better. Now we get on to one of my favorite ones, which is dropped items multiplier. So if we compound this with the fact that we are doing ×3 pal appearance rate, this is basically going to give you 9 times everything that you would have normally had. Because like if there's 1 pen gullet and that's going to drop 1 pal fluid, well now you're going to get 3 pen gullets that drop 3 pal fluid each for 9. So this makes farming anything from a pal drop 9 times faster. The only thing this may not affect that well is things like schematics, because it still has the same percentage drop. It'll just drop you 3 instead of 1 when it drops. So very powerful. I would definitely recommend having this one up on 3. I don't know why you wouldn't do it. Time to incubate eggs. This is going to depend on you, but even doing this on 1 is going to make it so that some of the bigger eggs take forever to hatch. And so unless you have a permanently online server, I don't know why you wouldn't have this on 0. Then you just whack your egg in the incubator and then it's done straight away. Makes breeding real nice, especially if you've got a lot of eggs, or like me, so I save a lot of my eggs because again, I like to put eggs in a box, and then my daughter comes home from school and she's like, oh my god, there's all these eggs to hatch, and she has a really good time, and then she doesn't have to wait 5 hours to hatch a few eggs. So I think having this down at 0, it's probably going to be pretty common. That's probably what I would recommend as well. Having events enabled, this is going to be on you. We turn this on and off in between games depending on what we want to do that day. Like generally speaking, we have it off mostly because the family is drastically lower level than me. I think my wife's the highest at like level 35 35 or something, because they just haven't bothered with the leveling. They've all just been building bases and stuff. Having this off is good for us, because if you have this on and you're like drastically higher level than someone else on the server, they're just going to get absolutely annihilated. So it's it doesn't balance across like a group or anything like this. It just seems to balance based on the highest level player on the server, which just makes it very difficult to fend them off. Have it on for a bit of fun, I would, and then turn it off like for a little bit, because there's not that much that you get out of the raids. All they do is mess everything up anyway, but they can be fun. So just, you know, make sure that you toggle this on or off depending on your preference for the time that you are logging into your game. Death penalty. We turned this off because, as I was just saying, when my daughter dies, she loses stuff, which she has done. This is just a nice little catch-all. We've got drop all items except equipment. So basically, this is going to drop everything out of your inventory. And then we got drop all items, and then we got drop all items and pals. I don't have a recommendation. You do whatever you feel like you're doing. Like if you want to like a proper survival, every time you die, you've got to go pick your stuff up. You can do that. Depending on where you die and drop your stuff, that would be really bad. If you've got an ice pal and you're facing off like in a fire area and you need that ice pal to be in that fight, like some of this can get really, really messy, I reckon, really, really fast. But if you want to be the person that is prepped and going in and all that other stuff, this can be fun. Other than that, this is mostly just a slowdown thing. I don't know. I don't think most people would keep this on. If you've clicked on this, not realizing what all of the settings are, and you're looking at this, you go, oh man, that could have saved me like an hour. Like me, you come in from like a 10-hour shift. You just want to bang 2 hours on the game. You don't want to spend half an hour like collecting all your stuff, so I would probably keep this one off most of the time. But again, it depends on the world that you're doing, kind of how you want to challenge yourself. Maximum powers should be at 20. I don't know why the game defaults to 15. I know it's for performance purposes, but this should be up on 20. I don't know why you wouldn't have that on 20. When your base gets to max rank, having 20 powers out so that you can do everything that you want to do is just obviously good. Maximum number of guilds. I don't even know if we can have enough people on to have 20 guilds on a server right now, so that's up to you guys. Like for me, technically speaking, there could be a maximum of 4. And of course, if you're playing with people, there's a bit of a dilemma here, because you can be in a guild and a guild can have 3 bases, or let's say with my family there's 4 of us, we could all separate out into separate guilds and have 3 bases each, but then we can't actually interact with each other. And I don't actually know how the bases react to each other right now. I haven't tested it. There's no PvP in the game right now, so you're literally just going to be in each other's way. Realistically speaking, if you're playing co-op, I don't know why you'd have more than 1 guild, maybe 2, I guess, if you want to have some kind of race for the best spots competition. But ultimately, that is all of the settings and how I would have mine. Let's have a quick just scroll down. Double day and night speed, because it's just better. XP, good. Capture rates, number of pals just should always be at 3. I don't know why you wouldn't have it on 3. Everything else is basically to taste, apart from have drop titans on at 3, because that's massive. And then I would probably turn this off. Like I'd get rid of all of the annoyance stuff. I don't know why you'd allow yourself to be annoyed. And then that is going to be the best settings covered. I'm going to go ahead, accept that, and continue playing.